Princeton students and faculty and visitors. How are you? Let me hear you say, let's get this money.
Let's get this money.
Awesome. So today I'm going to be talking to you about challenges and opportunities in Jamaica's investment climate post-COVID, because a lot has been happening. I don't know how familiar you are with what's been going on with Jamaica. Was anybody here at the presentation last year? A few people. So some of you might know some of this story. So let's start in the year 7 BC. We're going all the way back. That's 7 years before COVID. 2013. So this headline here is from the Financial Times, and look at the pull-out quote. It says, when Jamaica signed its last IMF program in 2013, most of the fund's staff were so sure it would fail that they often opened internal follow-up meetings with a sardonic joke. Has Jamaica crashed yet? That's how bad it was. So the country had been going through multiple IMF agreements over several decades. And so Jamaica was just a running joke at the time. But fast forward to the year 1 BC, 1 year before COVID, 2019, and The Economist reported that Jamaica's tumultuous relationship with the IMF actually had a happy ending. So we ended an extended fund facility in 2016 and then graduated to a standby agreement, which ended in 2019. And the economy actually was starting to improve. For the first time in decades, these policies actually worked. And so we see Jamaica's debt to GDP falling dramatically from 144% in 2012 when the IMF program began, or the most recent one, and then coming all the way down to 94% in the year 1 BC, 2019. And the program was so successful that the IMF even recruited Jamaica's finance minister to become their deputy managing director, and he started that job just last week. So Dr. Nigel Clark is now one of the big wigs at the IMF. And this in turn, because debt was coming down, and so we didn't have to spend so much money on debt payments anymore, and there was more fiscal space for investment in the local economy. And then also, very importantly, going back to pre-IMF times, what was happening was, what had happened was, so because a lot of that debt was actually owed to local firms, local banks, the local wealthy class, the local people did not have an incentive to invest in the economy because the government was borrowing at exorbitant rates, 30% interest rate and higher. And if you can get an easy 30% interest rate by buying a government treasury bill, why would you invest in a business? Why would you buy real estate? Why would you invest in the local stock market? And so when all of that changed as a result of the changes implemented under the IMF agreement, that money needed somewhere to go. And so that money started going into local investments, into the stock market, into entrepreneurship, into real estate. And we started seeing development happening rapidly on the island, including becoming the best performing stock exchange in the entire world twice within a 5-year period, 2015, and then again in 2018, 233% returns in 1 year. And so we look here at this chart. I feel like you guys should give me an honorary PhD, the amount of charts I was making for this presentation, all the data, all the Excel spreadsheets. And we see Jamaica's economic performance. This is the Jamaica Stock Exchange's performance between 2010 and 2012. And we see that sharp escalation in what was happening and what during the IMF years, how everything was stagnant. So what happened is that we were able to successfully reverse the crowding out of investment that was occurring. And we finally started seeing investment in the local stock market, and like I mentioned, real estate, as well as entrepreneurship. So we're like this guy putting in the work. Until you guys know what happened in 2020. March 10, 2020, the first case of the coronavirus was recorded in Jamaica, and everything changed. So 10 days later or 11 days later, Jamaica closed its borders. And if you guys know anything about Jamaica, this is an island heavily dependent on tourism. It makes a large amount of its money from tourism dollars, and it contributes a large percentage of the economy, as well as a large percentage of foreign exchange, the US dollars that we need to trade with the world. And all of that was cut off very suddenly and very quickly. So what happened to the local stock exchange? Because a lot of people were brand new, jumping in, they're seeing all this excitement on the stock exchange. They start wanting to invest. They jump in just before this, the government had launched an IPO selling the national highway, and you had a bunch of new investors, literally like 2 weeks before COVID, and now the stock market crashes 30% between March 8 and March, I think it's 22. And when you zoom out, because this slide didn't look that impressive, but when you zoom out, you really see that dramatic fall off because of COVID. Now, you would think that, okay, COVID happened and we're going to blame all of the economic misfortune on what happened during COVID. But if you look at this Gleaner article from April 5, 2023, you can see that the market still has not recovered. And you might be wondering, okay, so what has happened between 2020 and 2023, 24, why we still aren't there yet? What is happening post-COVID, and what are the signs that we can look forward to come 2025? So I'm going to walk you through a few factors that have affected the island since then. So one, NCB, which is the largest commercial bank in Jamaica, implemented this no dividend policy, and I'll explain further. Two, we've had a high interest rate environment because of inflation. And three, loss of investor confidence post a big financial scandal that occurred last year. So starting with NCB, like I mentioned, the largest commercial bank in Jamaica. And this chart here shows that it's the fourth largest company listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. It's fourth now, but pre-COVID, it was easily the largest company listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And because of the weight that it has to the entire listings on the stock exchange, whatever happens to NCB happens to the rest of the market. So when NCB falls, the entire market falls with it. It just drags everything behind. So you can see here, pre-COVID, NCB was trading at well over $200. NCB was a hot stock. People were saying was going to $1,000. Everybody wanted in. I bought some at $200. And then it fell to about $150 during COVID. But today it's at $51.82, down 76%. So what happened during all of these years in between? So one, NCB stopped paying dividends. They decided, and like I said, this is one of the largest companies in Jamaica. A lot of pensioners rely on those NCB dividends. Every 3 months, you get your dividend check, and you're going to live off of those dividends. You invest, you collect your dividends. And a lot of institutional investors as well rely on their dividends. NCB decides, post-COVID, we're not doing as great as we wanted to. We're not going to pay dividends for 2 years. They didn't say for how long. But at the time, people were like, well, if I'm not getting my dividends, what's the point of me owning this stock? People start selling off their stock. Then you have this guy. Does anybody know who that is? That's Michael Leachin, Jamaican Canadian billionaire, majority shareholder in NCB. This headline, I'm not happy, made the rounds in Jamaica at the time because he did not like what was happening. As a majority shareholder, he's also not getting his dividends, and people are not happy with NCB, so he wasn't happy either. And then he did an odd thing and took a leave of absence from the financial group. And a lot of speculation started happening because he also, around the same time, sold his mega yacht. He was selling property. He was like selling a beach property in I think it was, I don't remember where, somewhere in the Caribbean. And he was doing a lot of kind of things that people thought were strange. And there started being rumors. Does he have cancer? Is he dying? Michael Leachin is going broke. That's why he's selling all of this property. And so that further eroded investor confidence in NCB. And so he had to come out and say, I'm healthy and fine. He was even doing push-ups on TV. He said, no, nothing is wrong with me. And eventually came back to the company. So if you look at the timeline here, so around mid-2021, NCB stopped making their dividend payments. Around early 2023, Leachin took his leave of absence. And then later on in the year, they resumed dividends. So now let's look at some other factors. So we talked about NCB stopped paying dividends already. The other factor was those interest rates. Bank of Jamaica started raising interest rates. So during the IMF period, Jamaica's economy was starting to improve, and the Bank of Jamaica decided that they're going to start lowering interest rates. And they did so much so that by 2020 or late 2019, interest rates were at an all-time low of 0.5%. And so we were enjoying that. You know, you can get a car loan at very low interest rates. You can get a mortgage at very low interest rates. COVID hits. A year later, we start seeing inflation. And so the Bank of Jamaica decides, any econ students in here? What happens when inflation hits? Monetary policy, what do? They start raising the interest rates, right? So they started raising interest rates, smart people in the back. The Bank of Jamaica, well, the answer was right there anyway. The Bank of Jamaica started raising interest rates. And so we went all the way from 0.5% all the way up to 7% by, what was that, like early mid 2022. And it stayed there for quite some time up until just recently in August, they started bringing those interest rates down again. So next question for our econ majors, what happens when interest rates go up? What happens to the stock market when interest rates go up? All right, when interest rates go up, stock prices tend to fall. And the reason for that is, like I mentioned earlier with the Jamaica example, if you can get an easy 10, 12% interest by investing in bonds and treasury bills, why would you risk your money on the stock market? It's pretty easy to make money over here, so people stop investing in stocks. So we see the slide start going down again. And then what happens in January of 2023? You guys know this person? Usain Bolt. This was international headlines. His investment advisor allegedly stole about $13 million US from his account. And this was a major, major story in Jamaica. For several months, it dramatically affected investor confidence. People were closing their investment accounts. People said they don't trust the system. If you can thief from Usain Bolt, you're going to thief from me. I'd rather put my money under the mattress. And that sentiment pervaded throughout much of 2023 and even carried through into 2024. And it doesn't help that as recently as October, another headline from Usain Bolt saying he is shocked and disappointed at the lack of updates on the SSL fraud, and he hasn't gotten his money back. So that doesn't help the situation at all. So with all that said, what is the outlook for 2025? What do you guys think? No look too good? Well, in the words of the one named Mr. Richie Spice, the world is a cycle. Absolutely. Everything that happens, go around in a circle. What goes up must come down. What's down must eventually go up. So Leachin says, I'm happy now. And this was written in May 2024. NCB had started paying dividends again. There's been somewhat of a turnaround. People are still kind of skeptical about doing business with the bank, but things have improved from an investor standpoint. The stock is still down. I don't know how long it will take for investors to, return their confidence in the stock, but Leachin at least says he's happy. And now the Bank of Jamaica has started cutting interest rates. So in August, they cut interest rates just a toops from 7% to 6.75%. And then in September, they cut it again to 6.5%. And then that was quickly preceded by the US Federal Reserve also cutting interest rates here, which was big news as well, because they hadn't cut interest rates for some time. And according to Reuters, the Fed is also predicted to cut interest rates again next week and in December. And then we see the JSE performance improving since the interest rates cuts. So performance is now up 3.5%. Not dramatic, but it is an improvement. Also, we have started to see a lot of new entrepreneurial activity in Jamaica. So in 2021, the country recorded a record number of new businesses being registered, which might not be that surprising because it was just after COVID, people lost their jobs. Now they're trying a little thing, trying to hustle. But then it also continued in 2022, where we saw another record number of new companies being incorporated. So what are the stock market predictions for 2025 in Jamaica? Well, we're going to throw it over now to a guy named Dan Theok. He is I think it's the chief investment officer over at Mayberry Investments. This is an interview I did with him a few months ago.
Really bullish on the stock market, and I think we're going to have a stellar year over the next 12 to 18 months. I'm going to bet 2025 will be one of our best years ever.
Last year, there was only one IPO on the Jamaican market all year. That's
But
me.
Dan says Mayberry has some coming up.
And he's predicting at least 10 next year, including 2 big ones.
And I've got about 5 or 6 really good ones in the pipeline. I can't speak to them just now, but when the timing is right, we're watching interest rates a little bit more in that regard to ensure we get good valuations. When the timing is right, you're going to see a lot of activity. I think 2025, we could see Kalilah more than 10 IPOs, and I expect 2 really big ones to come forward as well too. When I say big, I mean over $5 billion. So I think next year is going to be a great year for the market.
Any stock market investors in the room? A few. All right. What do you do when the market is down? You buy. Oh, good buying opportunity. So right now the market is down, and we have somebody like Dan Theok, which granted, he is biased because he works at an investment firm, so he wants you to be optimistic, but there are signs that the market is poised for a recovery. So now is a great time to take that buying opportunity to buy. But what else could potentially influence what happens next year and beyond? Well, Jamaica is due to have a general election next year, constitutionally due by, I think, around September. And the PNP, which is in opposition right now, is leading in the polls. And so this man, Mark Golding, is widely expected to be Jamaica's next prime minister. And the PNP traditionally is a lot more liberal. They actually have a socialist background. And so you may wonder, well, how is the PNP going to manage the economy? Because the JLP is more akin to the Republican Party in the US, while the PNP is more akin to the Democrats. So what is that going to mean for the economy? But when you look at Mark Golding's background, he's an investment banker by trade, founded Daring, Bunting and Golding. It's quite unlikely that they're going to change anything dramatically. And he even told me so on my show, Taking Stock.
Specifically on the economy, what would you and your party do differently?
Well, I think it is important to continue the trajectory of reducing the public debt and achieving debt sustainability.
So yeah, it is not going to change much. And even though the political parties ideologically are different, right about now, they're kind of looking a lot the same. So we expect this trajectory to continue. We're down to 67% of GDP now, coming all the way from 144%, which is truly remarkable. We're expected to get to about 53%, which frees up a lot of room for investment in infrastructure, for paying teachers, for paying police and nurses and doctors and all these amazing things. And I am also optimistic that 2025 and beyond is going to look really good for Jamaica, and by extension, some of the rest of the Caribbean as well. Now, if you want to learn more about investing in Jamaica and the Caribbean, I do cover Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Eastern Caribbean, stock markets. Connect with me. Yes, take up those phones. And of course, let's get this money. Thank you very much.